welcome back to yet another episode of Animation Dissection, the podcast where your favorite cartoons are smashed into a comet and then spectral image to see what they're made out of. Today, you're having your regular host here, Ryan Magnuson, also known as Neeksy, with...
Hey, I'm Zorak.
And we have a special guest here...
Hey, I'm Tyrs.
...to talk about Dingo Pictures, the laboratory of the Dexters.
That's one way to describe. Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
Johnny Test. Okay, it's Johnny Test, the dark side of Canadian subsidies. Those of you who have watched Cartoon Network will be very familiar with it, but I was actually kind of surprised to know that the show was originally premiering back in like 2005 on the Kids WB, which I had absolutely no idea about. Like, it premiered in the same block as Lunatics Unleashed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Such a esteemed company.
Yes,
See, and I can't even believe it's that old. I don't remember seeing it before, like, 2010.
Well, remember what happened to the WB. It was then...
Yeah.
So the WB pretty much failed terribly and then was merged with another failing network, UPN, and became the CW. And then during that merger... another company called Cookie Jar Entertainment. So, okay, the show was originally actually produced in the U.S. with some Canadian studios at Warner Brothers, but during that merger and when the budget got slashed, Cookie Jar Entertainment, which is like a Canadian production house that does kind of like a lot of the stuff you see on Teletoon, which is the Canadian Cartoon Network of sorts, they pretty much took over the main production, and the entire original staff was like laid off. I think this was like only one season before this whole thing got switched around. And then it got put on Teletoon and Cartoon Network, I think sometime around 2008. And then I think Cookie Jar is now bought by like this huge conglomerate company in Canada called DHX Entertainment. And it's pretty much all Canadian now, with I think some stuff we've done in the U.S. Like I think some of the voices are U.S., but I think a lot of them are actually Canadian actors as well because I hear them in tons of Canadian stuff. And as far as I know, the last new season started in the spring of last year, so 2014. And I'm probably betting that it's going to be renewed again just out of sheer inertia because it does get fairly good ratings. As for the creator of the show, he has created other shows besides this, but they're mostly those kind of live-action Nickelodeon sitcoms. Like there's this one about like a boy band or something like that. And he worked on some Nickelodeon shows in the past as a writer before he developed this show. I think something like I think he was on Fairly Odd Parents or something like that as like a head writer, and then he developed this show. And I think one of the producers is one of the guys that did the Dick Figures movie from like the Mondo Media YouTube thing. So the show is, of course, done mostly in Flash, and it's with the budget slashed and going up to Canada. It's kind of a symbol of the subsidies that kind of go in. So unlike the U.S., Canada has a huge subsidy for a lot of its animation. So the prices for getting a lot of the footage done up there is fairly low, so even U.S. productions will often outsource their actual animation responsibilities up to Canada. I mean, and also, of course, places like South Korea and things like that. Shows like Bob's Burgers, Teen Titans Go, things like that, a lot of them are animated up in Canada, whereas like the storyboards and certain things are done in the U.S., but the actual, movement work is shipped up there.
So with these subsidies, I have a question.
Yes.
How much are they paid per WHIPCRACK?
It's probably very, very little, considering that they must not have to pay very many royalties.
Well, I'm just imagining if is the Canadian government saying, okay, we're paying you actually the actual value is per WHIPCRACK, so they're actually trying to find as much ways that they can stick it in the episode, kind of like a money making scheme.
No, I that would actually be a better explanation than the one I have. The explanation I have for what we are referencing is the fact that almost every arm motion and sometimes when someone makes a comment, it's followed by a whip crack noise, which would normally be hard to hear because all the characters are constantly screaming all the time.
Whoa!
It's like, whoa, I don't know how to modulate my voice, okay? So between that, you hear a bunch of whip crack noises. And my theory is based off of if you guys have watched King of the Hill and you saw the episode where Bobby becomes the morning announcement kid, and Peggy realizes the reason the kids aren't laughing at the jokes is because there's no like wacky morning DJ sound effect after it. So she rings a cowbell and it's like, this is how you know when to laugh. And she rings the cowbell after every joke he makes. I think that's I think that is like mechanically the same thing they're doing with this, is that they know that none of their jokes are actually that funny, and so what they do instead is they make up for it with just sheer shrillness.
But there's like 500
everything.
whip cracks per episode, like literally like 500 per episode.
Well, the reason they do that is if there is a moment of silence, people will have a chance to think back and go, wait, that isn't funny. It's like, that wasn't a good joke.
I think that's overthinking it.
They use it to fill. They just use it to fill space. It's
and there is no space.
An audio.
It.
Yeah, it's an audio. It's the audio version of a pause for them. Instead of having any character or anything in the show stopping making noise, they find every spot where there's no noise and they add a whip crack. That's why occasionally whip cracks happen for even no reason. It's just like they're just standing there and a whip crack happens because there was a pause and sound.
I think I've seen one with a blink. I think I saw the characters blink and have a whip crack.
Yeah, it's
because the episode I was watching, it's literally if silence were to be there, whip crack is added.
Yeah, I want to have a pin drop.
The writers
and land
are just terrified of silence.
Because they realize that any moment of silence is some level of, the comedy works by tone and timing, and usually there's at least like space to breathe, so you can kind of reflect on what the joke is doing, even if it's very short and you're not doing it consciously. I think in this case they're like, yeah, our jokes are really not funny, so we're just going to turn everything up to 11. I mean, even visually everything is shrill. Like the colors are like a Technicolor nightmare. Like everything about the show is just, I don't want to use vibrant because vibrant is often has a positive connotation to it. It's just loud. Everything's loud. The voices, the whip crack, the speed of the jokes, the colors. I mean, the animation is just boring puppeting, but God, is everything just loud in the show.
It really, the funny thing is that the show, when you're saying that though, the show itself is very
bland.
Bland, yeah. It's like very generic. It feels kind of by the numbers sort of thing where they took Dexter's Lab. Yeah. They made it bland and slightly more Canadian.
Well, yeah, like apparently they changed like the flags depending on who's broadcasting it. So like the flag over his school is either the Canadian flag or the US flag depending on where it's broadcast.
That's funny.
It's so general that there's no like the city's just called Pork Belly because I guess that's supposed to be a punchline, but it doesn't really, I don't know. And as you mentioned, we have the similarities to Dexter's Lab. So you have, I guess we should go into what the premise of the show is that you have a genius inventor with red hair and glasses, with a mentally challenged sibling with blonde hair, and
well, and here's the problem with this, because I'm gonna interject with this. Okay. Every episode I've caught and the episodes that I've watched starts with that premise. They have the sisters, they're smart. Johnny Test, he's so stupid, I don't even know how he breathes. And the show only has two premises, and the premises that the show has that are only different is between whether the sisters have invented something and want to test it on Johnny, or the sisters have invented something and don't want Johnny to mess with it. Those are the only two premises for this show.
No, wait, they have another one.
You go to the peak, something bad always happens, regardless of who did it. If the sisters did it, it goes wrong. If Johnny messes with it, it goes wrong. At that moment, Johnny stops being the dumb one. Every episode is solved by Johnny being street smart and clever. He's literally based off of Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes, he was considered stupid because he doesn't do his homework. He'd rather play video games and watch TV. But in reality, he's incredibly smart and clever. He's just young and hyperactive.
And
so
then you even
every episode ends because Johnny saves the day.
There's even a Hobbs stand-in, too, with a dog.
Yeah, the dog is
Mookie.
the Hobbs stand-in. He is there to, as Hobbs was, he's always like, I don't think this is a good idea, or here is the rational answer to balance out Johnny having crazy things. The thing is Johnny's insanity always wins, and it's because it's the smarter good.
He's the boo-boo to Johnny's Yogi. I don't think that's such a good idea,
exactly.
Johnny.
But that's the weird thing about this is he's only stupid for the first half of every episode. The second half of every episode is, Johnny's creativity and cleverness wins. And they all do that. Every episode does that.
Yeah,
because
well,
it's
there's another
they're
premise.
always the same premise.
Oh, I found another premise. Sometimes you have it. Sometimes the show wants to be like a superhero show. So like there'll be episodes where it's just like here's a supervillain that we've just we formed this huge cast of supervillains by this point, which are kind of like what is it? Fat child with like lots of jewelry.
Well, he's the neutral character because he's actually one of Johnny's friends as well.
Well,
okay,
that's kind of
but
just...
And that actually, when you get through this, there is actually one more premise, and he figures into that.
Well, okay, so you have that. Then you have talking cat with butler, a freezer power guy, beekeeper guy, Darth helmet that's a vegetarian, just like a very gay mole man. Like, and so like sometimes the episodes will just be like yeah, well, that's the only one. But so there's that. Then they also have this one where they've decided, like, I think every season at this point they do like, hey, let's do a wacky racist parody, and then have it end in a tie every single time, and
that kind of goes into the villains thing.
Yeah.
The other one that pops into my head is, and this goes with the rich kid. Every once in a while they remember that half of their cast are supposed to be teenagers.
Yeah.
Because the next door neighbor and his sisters are all either in late middle school or early high school. So then it's a romantic comedy sort of thing because the rich fat kid really wants to date one of his sisters, and both of the sisters want to date the incredibly stupid neighbor. And
not only that,
always leaves the shenanigans and romantic comedy type stylings that Johnny is just sort of standing in the background for most of that episode.
Well, even there, the fat kid is also a super genius, like the super genius sisters.
Oh, yeah,
so
absolutely.
We're falling back into Dexter's Lab territory where it's just like Mandark.
He's literally Mandark, yeah.
And what's kind of creepy, I think, about what the sisters do is, taking the high concept aside, they're really spending a lot of their time trying to find ways to roofie their neighbor.
Yeah,
like that's really what it is. Like, you get rid of the sci-fi aspect. It's like, we're gonna trick him into loving us. We're gonna incapacitate him so we could have our way with him. Like, it's kind of creepy and weird and obsessive. And I don't know if the show has the wherewithal to kind of back away from that or have the comedic sensibilities to work within that, like a Rick and Morty would. But it's kind of messed up. And then I don't know. The episodes don't really. I mean, okay, there is no grand narrative. It's really just kind of like a series of, I think, slapstick gags at most, and then sometimes I think Dookie will kind of look to the camera and go like, "Oh, gee."
There is a vague continuity in the FBI need their help every once in a while, but that kind of falls into
you have the two
that
FBI
usually
guys.
Mixes into the superhero plot lines because usually it's one of the supervillains has come back and superpowered Johnny is the only way to fix it. Because once again, Johnny's generally smarter than the supervillains are. Because in that story, he needs to be.
Kid smarts.
And not only that, I think
his creativity and cleverness just wins.
And what is it? His superpower is farting.
No, actually, he does actually have a super suit that gives him basically Superman powers.
Oh, okay. Because I thought one of them was like he did
that once, I think. But yeah, it's like Johnny Man or something, and he's basically Superman.
I suppose we should pause here and just call attention to the fact that I think Tyrs has seen more of this show than both me and Neeksy have.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of it. I just because it's on. I mean, it's on Cartoon Network like constantly, and if you're just working with it in the background, like you're just gonna see it.
Here's the funny bit about it. Honestly, a lot of the times I saw it was because we have to leave our TV on for my dog.
Yeah,
and my dog likes to watch cartoons.
Because this show is great for that because it's high pitched enough.
So I would wander in, and the TV. My parents would be napping or whatever. Because
Johnny Test was on, and how could you stay away through that?
My dad goes to go to sleep because he's like 80, and he doesn't. I take care of my parents, so they keep it on for the dog. And I'd wander in and, Johnny Test is on. And I'd catch like 15, 20 minutes of it. That's pretty much most of a story. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's there. So I've seen a ton of episodes just by wandering through. Yeah, just through osmosis. Yeah. As I've discovered, I used to be like, I think this episode is okay. That show's not too bad. I tried to watch more than one episode today and couldn't really get through two because my mind just sort of lost it. I just sort of glazed off of it. It was running in the background, but I stopped paying attention and have no idea what the second episode I watched was.
Yeah,
So I guess you can watch this in one episode chunks if you do it like once a week.
yes, I came into this having only seen like parts of a couple episodes, and I was like, wow, not very good. But it didn't seem like that offensive. And I've watched more episodes today, and I don't think the show is like bad in the sense of like it's offensively
not
bad.
aggressively terrible.
It's not offensive in any way. In fact, it's incredibly unoffensive.
That's really the issue, is that it's so boring and generic.
Yeah, it's
well,
just
again, it's just loud garbage.
It's just
kind of like the way I
loud.
would call it. It's not very good. It's loud. And it's kind of like, it's garbage. It's not stinky,
It's
diaper
like
garbage.
if a
It's
bowl
just
of
like,
vanilla mush was just screaming at you.
Like
It's
someone
not
put food
offensive.
color-
You can
it's
eat it,
food
but it doesn't have
coloring.
any flavor. It's just
it-
very, very loud, and it keeps yelling at you for some reason.
Yeah.
The one thing though is that the whip cracks move it to the other side though, where the whip cracks, once you know that they're there and have noticed that they are just constant, they are maddening.
Yeah, you can't unhear it. You can't unknow it. You know what I'd actually compare the show a lot to is, again, I'm making yet another reference to another animated sitcom, but remember that episode of The Simpsons with Poochie, the talking dog?
Yep.
Like, Johnny Test himself as a character is basically, I think, Poochie. I mean, he seems like he was designed like, yeah, we'll give him, like, spiky blonde hair and have it be flame-colored.
Yeah,
for
his
some
hair
reason,
is literally
and...
fire.
Yeah, his hair is literally fire, flame, and it's never really addressed or explained. Like, no one else in that universe has that type of coloring naturally, and he must be, like, what, 10? So he's probably not coloring it himself. He does
he's
the
like 8 or 9
skateboarding,
or
he has
10.
the cargo shorts, he has, like, the random, I think it's like a nuclear logo thing. I mean, like, everything about him. I mean, he's just missing sunglasses, because otherwise he has the whole attitude thing, and it's just...
There is one other character with his hair, and Zorak and me were talking about that.
Oh, yes,
she has the same hair.
Well, the female clone, and hers is just like a lightning bolt instead. But it's still like, she's just literally like a female version of him.
Yeah, because she's obviously,
like,
it's the whole, she's kind of the love interest, but not really, because they're kids and they're not,
they're 10 and
Johnny's
they hate each other.
interested in her, but generally she's better at everything that Johnny does.
But
so
she has
it's that
doesn't
weird...
she have a dog or a cat or something that's
she has
intelligent?
a dog too.
She has,
but
yeah,
but doesn't talk.
Yeah, and it's basically she is just female Johnny, so he's interested in her, but generally it ends up with her showing him up, and then he gets jealous and all this other crap.
Well, basically they're the Van Houtens. Like how they look exactly alike, therefore they're married or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the show is doing the same type of premise. It's like, well, obviously people are only attracted to pretty much either exact or gender swap clones of themselves, and that's how it works. Everybody else is not deserving of love. And now that you mentioned it, the other thing that drove me nuts about the show is they have this whole thing is like, nobody can find out that Dookie is this talking dog. Like, that is obviously too crazy for everybody to handle. And I go like, the parents are like aware of the fact that like their kids are inventing crazy shit, and like Johnny's gotten turned into a monster, and there's like a talking mouse or something.
I can give you an explanation.
But like no one else must know about talking Dookie.
Actually, one of the explanations is the reason that they don't this might have eventually been fixed, but in the first couple of seasons they couldn't let the dad know that Dookie talk, because he was said that the next time that they performed an experiment on the dog, he was going to ground them from their lab for the rest of their life, and then they went ahead and experimented on the dog and made him talk.
And yet they've done far worse things.
Yeah, that's the in-universe explanation for a while of why they had to hide Dookie's talkingness from their dad.
I guess.
It
seems like they have a whole bunch of things they kind of want to use as like little plot thread things, but they can't really commit to any of them, because if they do, that means they'll have, mined that reserve and they can't go back to it again.
Can we talk real quick about how, actually, speaking of the dad, like, the only thing that they actually do really different with this, and it's not like interesting at all, but it's just like kind of like, oh, this is your attempt to try to differentiate, is the fact that the dad is the stay-at-home dad and the mom is, high energy workplace, mom.
She's a
doing
lawyer,
business.
I believe.
Yeah,
she's basically one of those like in the 90s when you watch those movies like Beethoven. She was like the working mom stereotype from like back then.
But she's like this high-powered executive lawyer. The problem with the dad being stay-at-home is it almost as good, but the fact that he's a stay-at-home because it's a joke. He's highly neurotic and very effeminate, and therefore he can be a stay-at-home dad. They almost do something
almost
that's
progressive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Almost progressive, almost like, oh, that could actually be something that you could show and be like, this at least they're trying, and
Trying
then
to
they
do
turn it
something
into
different.
it's usually a joke.
And again, Dexter's Lab, the mother with, she wasn't just like the mother character in Dexter's Lab. She was the same type of obsessive, like all they did is they just, again, they swapped the genders. This, the genius and the idiot sibling swapped. I mean, it's ad libs cartoon show where they just switched everything.
But the thing
it's
is, the thing with Dexter's Lab though is that there was like a lot more to it in the sense that both the mom and the dads were basically like 50s stereotypes of parent figures.
Yep.
Like it's a joke. It was a joke in and of itself, or rather than it being like something that they build like micro gags around. The characters themselves weren't used for gags, though they were. I mean, the things that their entire characters were gags as well.
Well,
The
they also
thing
did
is-
things
is,
where they had episodes that examined. I mean, the difference is like Dexter's Lab had episodes about the parents, and it kind of examined their eccentricities and things like that. In this show, the parents really exist as a kind of a mechanism of the plot. You know, it's like, oh, we better not do this, otherwise we'll get in trouble. Or, oh no, Dad's making his terrible meatloaf. Whoa, I don't want to eat that. Can you make something that'll make it taste like pizza? You know, like that's the.
Is that a plot line of an episode?
Yes,
No.
actually, it was casserole,
is?
but yeah, they did that.
Oh God, I just made that up.
That happened.
God damn it.
Yeah, you made that up. No, they got there before you.
Oh Jesus.
I don't think you could think of a plot that they haven't already mined. I mean,
Wow, school is boring. I wish it was like Dick Dastardly action movie, man.
I think that's one of the superhero plots. I know that
God damn it.
they invented a time. They basically stole the time turner from Harry Potter so that he could just time travel forward in school as well.
Oh God.
Although I believe he, instead of asking his sisters to do that for him, he stole something and it went wrong with disastrous results. But I'm less sure on that one. I definitely, though, one of the episodes I was watching was the casserole needed to taste better episode.
Oh God.
Where they made like a spray or something, and then I think Johnny was using it on everything, and something went horribly wrong.
As it does.
But going back to the parents, the one thing that I was going to say, from Dexter's Lab, we knew things about Dexter's parents.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the Johnny Test's parents other than their job and the things that they've been used for a joke. And I've actually seen episodes. Like, nothing that I've seen ever explores those characters, where we actually got a couple episodes in Dexter's Lab that explored the parents.
Oh yeah. Well, like the thing is, like and just again in tone wise, Dexter's Lab. I mean, some people would call it like a bit labored timing, but it allowed those types of moments to breathe. You know, like whereas this one, it just won't. It doesn't relent ever.
Well,
and again, it feels like Poochie the Talking Dog. I mean, everything about it. It has that kind of loudness, that odd throwback feeling to like what like a group of 50-year-olds in the 90s would think what kids were like. It's just that.
Well, Gennady Tartakovsky, the guy who directed and created, Dexter's Lab, like he was really he was willing to do, and quite frequently did, just use silence itself as a joke. Like there were like long episodes of like Dexter's Lab that were completely silent and like dialogueless.
That's the thing. It was willing to have a variety in tone, whereas this, it's loud garbage. It's loud white noise is really what it is. It's just like you turned your TV volume up to 100 and like the screen's white and just blaring all the time, and you can't make a differentiation between anything. Like that's why I don't think any of the jokes that they do have, they don't land, because the timing and pacing is just so shrill. It just doesn't work. I mean that, and also there's no observation to it. I mean none of the jokes really seem like observations of anything interesting. I don't know. It's like stating the obvious as a joke, constantly.
Yep, pretty much.
But like one other thing I've noticed is like, boy, I bet this show is like creepy fetish material. Like just considering like you get all the weird body transformations constantly. Okay. Like it's. I mean, I don't want to have to type in Johnny Test in the DeviantArt and see what the hell comes out of it, because I am sure I am going to be goddamn horrified.
Well, that's true of everything, though. To be fair,
true, but
that's
but
true of literally everything.
Well, yeah, true, but this one actually presents it.
Wonder if there's art involving WHIPCRACKs.
The WHIPCRACK fan community, yes.
Like sexual WHIPCRACKs.
This is what Johnny Test did to me. I can't get it off without them.
Yeah. Bondage has gone in a very weird direction these days.
They don't even have to see it. They don't have to experience. They just have to hear the noise after someone shouting, "Whoa!" And again, like they kept like, why is I don't know if he's the only character that does this, but I think he is always shouting.
Everybody's shouting to some degree.
Everybody's shouting.
Even like when they're talking normally, they're kind of just shouting quietly.
It's like watching Fox News. Like they're always yelling at the camera. It's just, I mean, comparing it to all these other shows that are out there, its tone is just so. It's so much. I mean, like when you like on Cartoon Network, I mean, we have Adventure Time, which has its loud moments, but also knows when to not. You have Regular Show, which is paced like a British sitcom. You have Gravity Falls on Disney, which is, you know, kind of almost more classically stylized and can have both loud and quiet. Whereas this just doesn't. I mean, I know I keep coming back to it, but I'm just so flabbergasted at how loud this thing is. I mean, again, and visually. I mean, and well, let's talk about the animation too. Like it's very obviously Flash. It's that puppeting style in Flash, which, I mean, okay, yes, I think puppeting can work really well, and there are ways around it that, you know, make you not notice. Like I would say Bob's Burgers, for example, which is, I think, a highly puppeted show. It looks good though. Like you don't notice it that much, or you don't really care. Whereas this one, like the character line widths get all screwed up, so you'll have like a character, because they're just gonna, instead of redrawing the character to fit like a new background. So like I think there's an episode where like Johnny Test gets like shrunk or something, or he's like a mouse or something, and they just reuse the same background. So the backgrounds, they'll have like a table leg where the line that defines the edge of the table leg is thicker than the character himself. So it becomes really obviously that this is all kind of copy-pasted elements. And then everyone in this universe seems to have like horrible claw fingers for some reason or the other.
Because it's stylized and edgy. That's cool.
I guess. It's like the Lunatics' hands.
Oh, God. Well, you did say they came up with the same block, so yeah, kind of.
It was the same time. I mean,
it's the kind of same kind of mindset behind it, though. Like, it has that, like, a lot of the design elements, like, graphically, and what they're going with it. Is they're going for this hyper-energy version of shrill genericness. The only difference is that Looney Tunes was like offensive in the sense like, oh, you could remember that actual Looney Tunes exist. So the Lunatics is just
the Lunatics
awful.
was offensive for a lot of reasons.
Well, Lunatics had something to destroy.
Yeah.
Like it had a legacy and had memories and associations with which it used and basically shat all over them and then wiped them on people's faces, and it's like, here you go.
Yeah,
you
but the
Looney
same thing.
Tunes.
Even with all that, Lunatics itself was just fucking awful.
Well, yeah.
Like to that level. I mean,
that
at least Johnny Test has
because
has
it destroyed
that going
memories.
For it. That Johnny Test isn't just straight garbage. It's just really bland.
Well, again, it's not offensively, it's not aggressively. Well, actually, no, it is kind of aggressive in that it just, you know, in terms of volume.
Yeah, it is a very aggressive show, but it's not. It's aggressive with no point. It's not really trying to be aggressively anything. It's just the loud kid that won't stop screaming.
Yeah, that's really it. He's that kid in your elementary school that either had some kind of ADHD problem or didn't have the ability to modulate his voice or something.
Yeah. It's kind of just ADHD the show. That's really what they're going off of. It is just constant movement and sound and noise, and for no point, doesn't really know why it has to do that. There's just a chemical imbalance in the show's brain, and it just has to.
It has to be really depressing working on this show, I imagine. In the sense, like, they're doing nothing interesting at all, really. Like, it's money and they're animating and whatnot, but like imagine like the writing staff here. It seems to me like they're not even trying really to do anything like new or exciting. They're just kind of going
and
and filling.
It might just be easy. It's easiness. I mean, like the typical episode. Like, I mean, I came up with that idea for one just out of the top of my head, and all you have to do is just fill in the Mad Libs. Yep. You know, it's like Johnny wants blank. He also refers to himself in third person. Like, Johnny wants to pass a history test. Sisters make something. I'm going to misuse that thing. Oh, no. And that's pretty much, that's it.
Yeah. No, yeah,
Like,
that's
yeah, you just fill in the blank.
I bet that
That's all you have
episode
to do. You do well, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, well, literally
yeah, I'm
that
pretty
episode
sure
has
it did.
happened.
Yeah.
It's
It goes
like
back
build
in
me a
10 and it's
time
Bill and
machine
Ted,
to
yeah.
show me what history was like, because then I can learn.
But yeah, and the sad thing is there's at least one writer that actually is proud of what they're doing. There's always one or two that are like, I think I'm doing a good job because the show is popular. It gets picked up again. It's had multiple seasons. It's had 6 seasons. That's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, as you said, with between 1 and 2, they didn't go on, but there's probably that one writer that stuck through the entire time, so he's got 5 seasons under his belt. That's a hell of a thing.
Yeah,
I mean, I
don't want to think about the person who's like laboring under it. Like they stay up at midnight going like, I have to make this episode great.
What
will
is
Dookie
Johnny
say
gonna
when
do
he
this
sees
episode?
Johnny fall down. I have to make this amazing joke. I am a tortured artist. I have to do this. Like I don't want to think about the person.
He's
he's
drinking in his home office, trying to think what to do, and he looks on the wall, and he sees hanging there. He sees the whip. He's like, that's it.
He sees pictures of like Hemingway, and he's like, my master, how could I achieve your level of greatness in writing? Like someone actually thinks they're making something amazing art. It's like, I mean, like, I'm actually more worried if someone thinks they're doing like something amazing with the show rather than being like, oh yeah, it's a show, it's for kids. I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with making something that's just kind of like bland, and because I mean, the whole American media landscape is filled with things that are just kind of bland space filler, and it's okay to produce those, but like, I don't think anyone should be proud of it by any means. But like, I don't know. I mean, I also just I remember this show for me was always my big whipping boy for just like for the animation and why Flash I think is really terrible. And again, it's like as we saw with Ping Pong, Flash can be used for amazing things. I mean, and look at Bob's Burgers, which I think is done in Toon Boom, which is also a puppeting software. It could be used to make something that looks pretty good. And yet this just does not. It does not at all. It's just...
Well, isn't part of the reason why this is so also being constantly renewed and why it's constantly airing is also it's cheap. Because of those Canadian subsidies, it is very easy for, them to sell it out at like reduced price and get kind of constant, airing time.
Well, exactly as I mentioned earlier, like after the CW was, WE was turned into the CW and their budget was like slashed to hell, the fact that it was then able to be taken over by a Canadian company entirely for at least the production is kind of a sign of that. And also, like, you can make that for cheap up there, and then you can just sell it to other networks, and the other networks, they don't have to put a big amount of change into production costs. I mean, they're just buying the final product, so you're just selling the rights off. So, like, a network like Cartoon Network might order new episodes, but it's not expensive for them like doing a Steven Universe series or something like that, where they actually have to hire artists in the U.S. and, put artistry into it. They can just hire it off to Canada. And the thing is, like, okay, Canada has done some amazing animation in the past, and, like, it's kind of good that they have these kind of subsidies because it allows them to kind of, produce a lot more work. But at the same time, I think what's happened is that these subsidies have kind of have an unintentioned dark side to them, in that they've kind of allowed themselves to kind of become like a Korea-like situation. Again, not all of them. I think some of the companies up there are doing good work. It's just that some of it has kind of, the subsidies have allowed them to kind of pass those savings off to companies in the U.S. that could easily hire U.S. artists and kind of give more of a shit.
I imagine it has to be, though, like, working on like a show like that as an artist, I imagine it has to be like draining. Like, it has to eat you up, I would think. Unless you're, like you said, unless you're literally just working on it just to get,
a paycheck,
paycheck. But I would think that if you're working on it just to get a paycheck, there's like simpler jobs. You wouldn't get into the animation industry very well.
I don't think people intended that to be what their career is. But hey,
they just kind of fell into that hole.
Well,
it's kind of like, well, it's a regular paycheck, and I'm not, I don't have to worry about the thing ever going away because it's always going to be there.
Well, it's also, where else are you going to go? I mean, yes, there is a lot of animation out these days, but I don't think a lot of studios are willing to kind of pay for it.
Yeah, I understand. It's really hard to actually get an animation job. So, like, if you're able to get one, why would you, maybe you're thinking, like, down the line, man, maybe I can turn this job into, working somewhere else eventually,
or getting your own thing. I mean,
Yep.
looking at Cartoon Network, a lot of the people who worked on things like Flapjack or Adventure Time now get their own shows. They get to work on other projects, or they move to other networks. Like I think what is it? The guy that did Chowder, he has a new show coming out on Nickelodeon, for example. Like being able to do working on these previous other shows sometimes is a way of kind of moving up. But I think what might also be the case is that there is a situation where an assembly line style process where you've kind of created a system where individual artistry and individual skill doesn't matter anymore because what you're making is so mechanical and formulaic that you really just kind of create a disposable workforce. And I think that, and financially that's great because then you don't have to give people raises or have them move up. All you have to do is just go, well, we'll just cycle you out for a bunch of new grads so we don't have to pay more for something that doesn't require as much skill or heart or anything like that.
The thing is, though, like, for one, like, on this most recent point, like, yeah, that's the case. Maybe that is the case. But the thing is, the show doesn't look that bad in the sense, like, yeah, it looks really cheap and generic, but it doesn't look bad. So either their process is really good, that, like, talent makes no meaning, or they're just very good at, doing their kind of corner cutting. Because it doesn't look offensive. When I've watched, I didn't personally, not being an artist, obviously, coming in here, like all those caveats, like I didn't see anything that made me just go like, whoa, what the fuck was that? It just looks like, wow, this looks really cheap because basically nothing's happening, and what is happening is really, the only thing I saw was that with explosions, they tend to be the same exact explosion effect plugged in again and again.
Yeah.
It's
all symbol
based.
They do that with a lot of their effects. Coming from the actual like artistic side, whereas like I'm not an animator or anything, but I am an artist. My problem with the way it looks is literally, as you said, it's the brightness of the colors. Because, like, honestly, I think the characters, are done well. Like, they're bland, but they're done well. The
design
backgrounds
is effective.
and the sets,
yeah.
The designs, the sets, the characters, they're all done well. It's just then they're painted in the most horrifically garish clown paint that you could find. And it's like, so the line work, somebody's put effort into the line work to make it all fit. Everybody's on model, like everybody fits together. It's not like none of the characters that you see are like horribly disconnected. They all follow the theme. It's just that then they were sprayed with neon yellow paint, and it's like, dear God, what was the decision there?
Well, it's like, here's the thing is like, I would compare it to, even the modern Family Guy episodes, I don't know if you guys have watched any of them, even they have learned to tone down their background colors. They used to be that kind of horrible, early 2000s webcomic, like I'm going to use the default Photoshop palette and have it look like super saturated and gross. But now when you look at the modern day stuff, it's like, oh, they know actually how to use like, shades of gray and shades of other. It's like their backgrounds have gotten a lot better. They're not as garish anymore by any means. And yet, but this show, I think because it's supposed to be, I think that choice of volume in terms of the tone and color, I think that might be intentional because everything about this show has to be like whip zip bap bibbity boog wow crash wow.
Well, and that made me think. I don't think this show uses shades or shadows at all.
No,
it's all clean.
But when I say
primary
shades, I
colors.
mean in terms of color. Like, there are no cast shadows, nothing like that. But I mean,
no,
the shades of the color
I just mean
are.
In general, like that's another thing on the artistry. There is nothing does that. It's all the primary, same brightness color. Nothing's used for any highlight. Everything is just bright as hell. Like,
yeah, well, it's all hyper.
And I hadn't even thought about that until I started realizing it's like, no, it's all just. It looks like somebody digitally crayoned everything. They don't know how to use color to do depth and actually make it mean something. It's just monocolored painted. Hey, look, this thing is yellow, so it's always the same color of yellow. This one is green, it's always the same color of green. It never changes like colors do.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it all looks like MS Paint. This is my first webcomic.
Yeah, well, here's the thing: is as you said, it doesn't. When you said like they don't use color, that means something. I think that you've nailed to the heart of it. Is that nothing that they're doing in terms of the writing and the characters and what drives them or anything else like that. None of it really means anything. So therefore, maybe the visuals just don't really have to mean anything.
That's true.
I mean that could be it. I mean, again, it's just it feels basically what it is, And again, it's not nothing outrightly about it's offensive. It's just it's a corporate product. It feels like it was designed by a committee. It feels like it's written by ad lib. Its animation style is very mechanical, and reusing lots of old assets and just constant reuse of symbols and growing and shrinking the symbols rather than redrawing them for the camera angle you're working at. It's just that's what it is. It's an assembly line product, and because it's cheap and because it's not bad enough to have people rebel against it, it's going to get renewed and it's going to be successful to some degree. Well, it might not become a cultural classic. It's not going to be like an Adventure Time or something like that where it's become like the zeitgeist, but things don't have to become the zeitgeist to be profitable.
Sure, and the fact that they're outsourcing this to like 75 countries and like 12 different languages shows to some degree that they're succeeding in trying to make this generic enough that they can sell it to every possible audience. It is so milquetoast that it's compatible with like everything, everyone. Yeah. Or not necessarily compatible in the sense like everyone can relate to it, but it's more the sense that there's nothing to relate to, so you can't not relate to it.
It's like one of those ABC sitcoms. It's like those things got sent around the world with no problem because there was nothing offensive or even interesting about them, and they could translate to just about any situation.
Yeah.
Yep. So, again, Canada has done some good things, and I think we're going to do some episodes about some of the other things of this angle, that the dark side of the subsidies, but this is definitely not one of them.
Yeah, because you pointed me to like some of the other outsourced stuff they did, and they have like that canyon.
Well, it's not outsourced; it's stuff that's
you know what I'm sorry, you mean subsidized, like the other Canadian subsidized stuff like that.
Well, all of it's subsidized, which is why a lot of studios are hiring up there. They're actually looking for a lot of American talent.
What is Canada currently producing that's like good? Like maybe Bob's Burgers you mentioned, maybe.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch. They're also animating Rick and Morty up there now.
Okay.
Again, like not all of it's done up there, but like I think the storyboards are done down here in the U.S. still. But there's plenty of stuff, and there's plenty of there's talent up there. There's some very good schools up there. I just don't think the stuff that has been commissioned that's kind of like original Teletoon stuff has really been that interesting. We got we've had a ton of stuff like that, total drama series stuff. That's all Canadian. All that ilk of it, like spin-offs of it or things that are similar to it, they're all done in Canada. The ones I showed you, in particular, I think were the ones that I saw were on the Teletoon equivalent of Adult Swim. And they still show episodes of that old show, Undergrads. Like they're still like recycling that up there, even though that was only one season. They'll show it like every night on that Teletoon thing.
Those were Adult Swim equivalent shows?
Well, yeah, that's what they're on. They're on
but they
that
were
block.
so shitty. Sorry.
Well,
let me rephrase.
To be fair,
sure. Let me rephrase. I don't see how they appeal to an older audience at all, though.
No, well, they're kind of edgy because, the one I show. Okay, we're gonna have to do an episode on this one later, but let's at least reference it. Well, yes, because I think we brought it up, but or maybe just do an episode of a bunch of different ones in one.
Do we?
Yeah. The one that I'm talking about in particular. Well, there's two of them. One of them's more offensive than the other. One of them is Crash Canyon, which is kind of like a. I would say it's like the Chinese knockoff of Family Guy. Just the character design, the cutaways, just the overall aesthetic, except it's actually kind of animated worse somehow because the characters, when they walk, they glide and the legs just move. Everything is just as kind of like a low-rent version of it. And then there's the other one, which I think was downright offensive, which is called Forget About It, which is about a Italian-American family who were in the mob, and they get witness relocated to Canada, and that's it. And it's really just a series of Italian-American jokes about like how classless they are, or like it's just really awful.
It's all Joe Pesci jokes essentially, and it's all like just Godfather jokes. That's it.
Yeah, literally.
I didn't even watch an entire episode. I just saw the fucking intro pitch for it, and it's like, wow. It sucks.
That sounds really stupid.
It is. I think it's on Hulu.
Don't watch
and
it.
It's pretty terrible, but that's what they, that's one of those shows they show up there on the Teletoon thing, and it's just you know, there's just a lot of them. I mean, there's also a bunch of shows that, I mean, I barely remember, but you see them on like Cartoon Network sometimes during the daytime. Like, there's one called Scaredy Squirrel, I think, that was kind of like a SpongeBob kind of knockoff like thing. You had Almost Naked Animals and God, I can't remember. I think there was one called Garage Band or something like that. They're all produced in Canada, and they kind of really don't make much of an impact here. And but they all have the similar production style. Like I mean, I'm not going to say that they all have the same type of voice or jokes or things like that, but the way in which they're kind of produced, you can really see the kind of mechanical process in which they make them all, because they have very similar like visual style and character construction style. Like I see that a lot right now, and it's in, again, you know, it's subsidized, it's very cheap, and anybody who wants to make a show that's like a U.S. producer is going to be looking up there and go, oh, hey, you know, I could just take my pitch, have them animate it, and, you know, pocket the rest of the money. So again, it's like, it's great to have subsidies, because, you know, it would be nice if the U.S. subsidized a lot more art and animation and things like that. But there is the downside in that it can easily be kind of used as a form of extra corporate welfare.
And that's kind of been in general kind of the concern with this kind of thing. The question of whether you need to find some sort of middle ground with it, or, you know, I mean, obviously the U.S. doesn't have anything at all of that. I presume some states have some state, you know, subsidies or some sort of state sort of side, like financial incentives.
A lot of that, well, there's usually tax breaks and things like that to some degree.
Which kind of works to similar degrees. I mean, it's not the same as subsidies, mind. Yeah, I agree. But, I mean, that sort of thing exists to some degree in the United States because they want to encourage, you know, companies to stay within the U.S. with their business and whatnot, you know. But, sure, you quite right. Yeah.
Yeah.
WHIPCRAck.
Yes. So I guess since we have some extra time, let's talk about the recent thing about the Oscars. One of the episodes that we have done of a very beloved movie, the Lego Movie, was not included into the category. So, and it seems like there's a lot of backlash about that, amongst, of course, other things that are definitely deserving of backlash. But since we're going to be talking about animation here, you know, why is the Lego Movie not included? I mean, some people have said, well, there's that live action element, but I think as far as I know, animation only has to include 75% animation for it to qualify, and I think the Lego Movie definitely was more than 75% animated.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, there's always been this kind of thing where the Academy has its kind of snubbiness about certain films and certain ideas. It's like like a horror film has never ever won Best Picture, even, you know, when you had like fabulous horror films coming out, you know, you had stuff like Psycho or like Vertigo or whatnot, or like, you know, Kubrick films that never ever won, you know, or even not were ever nominated for an Academy Award, you know. So I mean, I mean, I could see there being some sort of, you know, rejection to some degree of what Lego Movie represents, either in the sense from either way you can interpret it. You know, some people will try to argue that it's anti-corporate, which is kind of a funny way to look at it, given that it's selling
especially
a product.
Considering the Academy and everything else. I mean, I would say also, I think the Academy has always had a really odd relationship with animation. They never really kind of viewed it as a form of film. They kind of want to put it into its own box. Whereas I go, like, animation is filmmaking. You know, it has all the same techniques. It's all the same about story. It's film. It should be, you know, an animated film should be able to compete in all the other categories that a regular live action film can do. And I think what they did is, you know, they kind of, it's a double-edged sword. Yes, by creating the animated category, they allowed them to at least somewhat recognize animation, but at the same time, by doing that, it allowed them to kind of allowed them to marginalize it in a lot of ways. I mean, you know, and also within that animation category, there's always been some like really strange choices and snubs. I mean, for example, what was it? The year that Happy Feet won, Paprika was released, and it didn't even get a nomination. You know, like that was like one of the big ones where I go like, oh wow. That's complete bullshit, you know. I mean, yes, the Oscars, I think, you know, a lot of people will say, well, it's just the Oscars and things like that. And yes, on some level, award shows and things like that are kind of silly in their own right. But they do have kind of an importance, not necessarily in saying, you know, as a culture saying, this is what's good. It's more like, this allows studios to make their prestige films, which is the closest thing that the major studios will do to make something that's kind of interesting in my mind. I mean, even though they're kind of become formulaic because of the Academy, but it at least the Oscars' existence allows them to make and produce films that are, not the typical blockbuster things and get recognition for that. Animation wise as well, it allows people to recognize that the animation exists, and financially it's a big incentive. I mean, being able to get like the boost from the winning the Oscar does really well for sales, and it encourages companies to produce more things. So it has that type of effect, in terms of like as the bettering the medium of film, or establishing some kind of filmic canon of classical works, maybe not so much. But at the same time, it would be kind of nice if it could if those two kind of competing interests could align, and that it would both act as, a way of giving financial recognition for stuff that might not necessarily, do well in the box office, but it's good for the medium to kind of hold these ones up and say like, hey, this is also a valid thing, and that, a movie's cultural value does not begin and end on the box office returns.
Unfortunately, the power of Hollywood and the kind of the ideas in Hollywood of how like Hollywood heads think really does drive the production of things like film and animation, because that's, as much as you go like, oh, Hollywood is fucking crazy and they're just obsessed with making money, and it's like the answer is, well, yeah, that is how they are. And because that's how the case is, it's like what they view as valuable and what their representatives act and treat as valuable kind of drives what things are to come. And sure, to be sure, the Academy does have a sense of snootiness to it. It's like there are films that people always say like that's an Academy film, like it's not the money-making films necessarily that get like Academy nominations, because there is kind of a pretense of artistry to it. But the things that are rejected are also kind of funny in the sense of what they actually turn away as a result.
Yeah. Well, like what they pick is not always necessarily the most daring and artistic things, because like what was it demographically? I think when you look at the people who vote on the Oscars, most of them it's old white men, like pretty much almost exclusively old white people, usually male. So it's kind of not surprising that a lot of them also don't watch all the screeners. They might only kind of have a passing that's like, oh, Pixar, yeah, I like Pixar, just give it to them. Like, well, I mean, they don't necessarily also know much about animation.
Well, you do hear stories about that. Well, you do hear stories about that where like I can't. What was this when we were discussing this like last year or something with the nominations, where it came out that where they're talking about the films and they were like the nominations like outright were saying like overtly like I haven't watched the film, but it's the kind of thing that should get nominated for certain films.
Yes, it was. I think there was a thing kind of about that, and I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I don't think there's kind of like a rigor.
Or they expected like you have to watch everything to get
even when they do watch it, they tend to not watch even the whole screener. It's more often or not that they only watch a couple of minutes of it, and off of that decide whether they like it or not. It can even be to the point of, oh well, this one actor walked in and we don't really care for that actor right now, so we just passed it by. Just because that was the scene that they saw.
Can we really quick go over the films that were actually nominated? Because some of these films are actually like pretty interesting.
Oh, they're interesting. Yeah. I mean, the ones I'm at least rooting for in terms of at least getting recognition is I think God, I'm trying to remember the title. I think it's Song of the Sea and The Tale of Princess Kaguya.
Yeah. I mean, Song of the Sea I have not seen, but I hear it's really good.
I've seen. I mean, I haven't been able to see the film itself, but I saw the trailer and I've seen a whole bunch of. I mean, it just looks a lot different than what else is being made, and it's just nice to see something that looks different. Yeah. And of course, Kaguya is I think the last Ghibli film that's been produced.
The film
so
that
far.
killed Ghibli from the looks of it.
Yeah, unfortunately, it didn't do financially well in Japan,
and they're not really releasing it widespread in the U.S. by any means.
No, I mean, I think Spirited Away was the last one that they tried to do large release, and then they kind of did a half-hearted release of other Ghibli films since.
Yeah, I mean, they'll put it on
DVD. Of the theaters it was shown in, it got very good reviews. And then I think How to Train Your Dragon 2, I think is the one that everyone's saying is kind of like the front runner this year. There's no Pixar movie. I think.
There's no Pixar movie, but there's the not Pixar movie in the sense that you have the Disney Animation Studios one, Big Hero 6,
Big Hero 6.
The Marvel animation film that's them seeing if they can take a really like mild and uninteresting Marvel property and make it make money.
Incredibly obscure.
It's like, can we make money off of the most
obscure.
weird shit out of Marvel? And the answer is yes. In fact, you can make a shit ton of money just by executing it well, it turns out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
Surprise.
I mean, I don't know. Have you guys seen some of the stuff from the original property? It was actually downright offensively terrible.
Wait, I have
Yes.
read some. I took a look at some of the comic shit. It looked really bad.
It was
boy.
really bad.
Yeah, some of it is actually kind of gets to the offensive level in some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what Disney did was probably a good job, but in terms of, I think in general, just what I was looking for, it's like, hey, if the Academy is the chance for something to kind of get recognition that might not normally get recognition under the similar kind of capitalistic means, I'm hoping for Song of the Sea or Kaguya to get it. I mean, at least I hope for something. I mean, one of the films I liked, Tourist, was or Force Majeure wasn't even nominated, so I mean, I have to hope for something. But then again, the Oscars are the Oscars, and we have to recognize that it's the opinions of mostly industry people, and many of them come from a kind of a limited and privileged background, and animation is still in the U.S. at least primarily viewed as something for children.
Have either of you seen How to Train Your Dragon 2 yet?
No, I have not yet. I heard it's pretty good.
Yeah, I've not seen it. I know the first one I've seen, and that was actually really, really good.
Yes. Yep.
So
I enjoyed the first one
I don't
a
know.
lot. I don't know.
Well, none of
second
the
one-
nominees are bad by any means that I see. It's just that I think Lego Movie was actually a lot more interesting to me than some of the other ones on there. I mean, yeah, it's made out of as we talked about, it's a movie for a corporate product, but it did a lot more interesting things.
It kind of
with
transcended it, though, is the thing. Like,
I
it's like
think
a
it
joke.
got the song got nominated. The Everything Is Awesome, I think, got nominated for one of the best song awards. Yeah.
Okay.
There is a level of irony in that I can't even deal with.
Oh yeah, well considering considering what the song is in the movie,
Yeah.
Sid is a huge.
Well,
irony.
How it was used, what it means,
yes.
Well, that's kind of
that's kind of just like putting a just a big red sticker on what the Academy really is at this point.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. That, in general, like the whole way that they've that song's been run with as a kind of thing. Like, it's a catchy song. It's so upbeat. And it's like, you don't remember the fact that in the film, like, the song is like a thinly veiled kind of parody of fascism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of.
Like, literally,
It's like a really happy version of "They Live," for God's sakes. It's like,
it really was.
yeah.
you put on the special headphones and you can just hear it mouthing over and over: "Obey, consume, obey." Like,
Don't think about anything.
so of course it gets an Academy nomination. That makes so much sense that the irony is at such a level that it's not even shocking. It's just like, yep, I agree, that happened.
I do wonder if the fact that the Kaguya Hime is it didn't have a very wide release even in the U.S. Like, I wonder how much of that is just like, Studio Ghibli, that's a studio that we know. We gave them an award before.
Yeah,
Check
it's
mark.
probably it's a lot of its recognition. I think Pixar for a long time was also kind of coasting on its kind of goodwill for quite a while in terms of the critical reception of things. And Ghibli, for both good and ill, it might have gotten at least some recognition because of that. Maybe the Academy just wanted to throw some bones to things that weren't kind of big studio releases here. I'm not quite sure. I mean, I don't think the Academy knows what to do with animation in general. I think the U.S. culture in particular, in the way it treats animation, it really doesn't know how to deal with it outside of kind of a very predetermined paradigm that it views it all.
Well,
in.
and I've always wondered sometimes if animation doesn't also get the doubly hard, as a lot of them that looking at it don't know how they would judge it because they're so used to judging actors and actresses off of specific things, and that doesn't always translate over to animation, and so they can't see it, so they're afraid to pick it because they're like, how would we judge that?
I would disagree. I would both agree and disagree. I would agree that I don't think they know how to apply their normal standards to animation, but at the same time, I wouldn't say that means that animation can't have those things applied to it. I mean, when you're an animator, at least when the way I was taught is that really what you're doing, it's all acting. You
It
could
is
do
acting,
you could do
yes.
subtle acting, and you really are
But
you're controlling, and you have the same camera angles. Mise en scène is still an aspect. All the aspects that exist in live action filmmaking are able to be present in animation as well. So I think you could. I think that yes, you can apply those same types of standards to animation. I just think that there's a cultural barrier that a lot of these people who are the Academy people, they look at it and go, well, it's animation, so I can't apply these types of standards, or
Well,
I
and
can't look at it that way, and they kind of refuse to do so.
I don't know how well and this is some of this because you are an animator. I don't know how much an animation layperson can really deal with studying things like, are the actors in the scene framed and on point and stuff, just because they're so used to seeing it from a real world perspective that it does translate over, but I don't think your average layperson can figure out how to translate that stuff like that, or how the actors deliver their lines. That they're always going to see an animation as something different because they're not seeing that character as an actor, they're seeing that character as being drawn by someone else.
I think that's just a limitation in terms of. I mean, again, I
it
think
is absolutely
I think it's just
a limitation on
of
people.
Perspective. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's absolutely a limitation for people, but it's very much what's causing them to be afraid of it, and people are generally not going to go outside of their comfort zone. So
well, I think
it ends
also
up
they're
with
just not used
animation
to it.
hanging out. I mean, because I don't know. Animation is a part of the. I want to say that I think it's disserving to America in general to say that we don't have a relationship with animation, because everyone does. We just don't see it as we just don't see animation as something that wins awards.
Well, part of it,
yes.
I think, is
a better way to phrase that, more than we've got a culture that's bad with animation, because we definitely don't.
Well, I think part of it in terms of I don't mean on the everyday public side. I mean culture in the sense that not just the Academy, but I think in the business side, where it's like
yes,
the U.S. would never make a film like Paprika under the current system. The U.S. would never make a film like Kiki's Delivery Service under the current system, in terms of the types of storytelling, the types of audiences it's targeting. The U.S. system and the way it goes. Well, it's kind of like how the comics industry in the U.S. for so long was dominated by the comics code, and so when you have a period of 40 years where people go, oh, it's the simplistic things for kids. Well, anybody who grows up under that type of system in the society that views it that way is going to go, yeah, it's always for kids. And then there'll be, it's like when you look at some of the animation coming out of like, France and Japan and other things like that, they don't have the kind of thing where they go, oh, animation, that means kids films. It's not, they don't have that instantaneous association in their head. Therefore, it allows them to kind of make things that are both for kids and also not. I mean, the Rabbi's Cat, for example, was not made for kids by any means, but it's still, it was a major French release for them. Under the current system and the way the corporate culture and the way the kind of the, hegemony thing, it's that, well, it's for kids, so we're not going to produce anything that kind of is that challenging. We're starting to see a little bit of it kind of creeping differently. I think from what I was reading about How to Train Your Dragon 2, they are starting to approach more adult themes and things like that, and respecting the audience's intelligence to some degree. But again, that can only happen underneath the guise of this is a kids movie.
Well, part of one thing to keep...
Well, and that is definitely a problem with the business aspect, because of course animators have been trying to do that for years. But yeah, the business aspect is separating across, because they want to do what they know. They don't want to pushing boundaries doesn't equal money, unfortunately. So,
not always. I mean, sometimes it does.
In a business sense, it never does.
Yes, exactly.
This coming from a businessman. Pushing boundaries never equals money. It is an expense that may eventually bring a return to the business, but the initial push is always an expense. You're always going to lose money on it, and especially in the Hollywood industry, they are in so much trouble with the internet and the rise of the new mediums, that they are not going to push that at all, because they have no idea. You've got to, as you said, it's a group of old men flailing wildly because they are completely out of touch with how the world is changing, no idea how to get back into touch with it, and just doing whatever they can, which means Hot Tub Time Machine 2 instead of, which will probably get nominated, instead of like Lego Movie that was different and good. but didn't get nominated because it's different.
Well, to be fair though, I mean, with the composition of the Academy, sure, it's a lot of Hollywood things, but a lot of these people are, in fact, filmmakers and film critics. Like, they know film. It's why the film Boyhood is probably going to win, every possible award that's been nominated to, and in fact, it's already won awards. It's because it's a film that filmmakers, and quite a lot of filmmakers like, in the sense of like the filmmaking, because wow, it's really impressive that it took you 10 years to make this film, and a lot of people like that film, some people don't like that film, but it's very much a film that appeals to, like, it's a filmmaker's
It's a filmmaker's film, yeah.
They don't have really a basis to that for the animation necessarily, because nobody really in the Academy, probably the vast majority of them, aren't animators and don't necessarily have, a firm basis necessarily of like, okay, I get what they're going for here. That's impressive. Or, though, to be fair, with certain films, I'm sure, if you see like a Studio Ghibli film, even if you don't have any real basis in animation, you probably can see it and go like, holy crap, they really animated the shit out of this.
And not just that, it's not just that they have to look at the animation side of it as a story and as a film. I think they have, anybody can, you don't have to be an expert in animation in order to appreciate it.
But they don't have necessarily...
They might not understand they might not be able to appreciate the technicality of it, without having the kind of experience of what to look for. But I don't know if the Academy or all the Academy voters are always looking at it that way. Sometimes they look at it as a complete whole, and they should be able to. But I think the argument we were having earlier was that they should have the ability to see it as a whole, but there is that cultural assumption that kind of, it's that wall that prevents them from being able to do so. Like they just... they don't know that they can apply that rubric of cinematography and mise-en-scène and all that and storytelling to the animated films as well. They just don't think to do so. I mean, it also comes out of the fact that, most of the animated films that are released in the U.S. under, major distributors, they aren't the types of prestige films that we would normally, expect, that the Academy would like. So I think there is kind of I think there's a lot of this is cultural assumption. And we're dealing with the aftermath of having, animation for so long being relegated to the kiddie pool, that we're going to have to, over time, kind of, break that assumption down, so that way we can really allow ourselves to make new things and embrace a lot of different genres and, do what other countries have often done with animation. And we're seeing it, I think. We're seeing it in small places. The internet has definitely allowed people to produce and distribute things that were not normally, made otherwise. I just think it's going to be, in terms of the mainstream studios, it's going to take them a lot longer to catch up than anybody else. I think that's it. I think that's it for Johnny Test and Oscars. I forgot to, ahead of time, figure out what we're doing for next week, though. Unless you guys have ideas.
I bet it'll be something about animation.
Oh, Mickey Shorts. Mickey Shorts.
Oh, right.
Mickey
yes,
Shorts.
yes. So we're hoping to talk about next time the new animated Mickey Shorts. So these are the ones that are kind of produced in a very odd style. You see them mostly online. They're kind of delightful little things. So we'll be talking about those.
I like them.
You can find them by going to youtube.com/user/Disney Shorts. And there should be a playlist there. If you just click playlist that says Mickey Shorts, they actually have them spread out across a few different accounts. But if you go through that playlist, they've been kind of adding them all. And if you also take a look at their general videos, because they're constantly uploading new ones, they're actually uploading them so damn quickly that I'm wondering how they're actually financially kind of justifying this. So,
well, we'll see how they do that. But we'll talk about those. We might do a stream of those eventually. Just check on Twitter and we'll probably announce that, or if we don't, just definitely go to YouTube and check them out. So we'll be talking about the new Mickey Mouse shorts, not the originals. Well, maybe in comparison to the originals, but, we'll see. Anyway, if you want to contact us, of course, as I said earlier, you can hit us up on Twitter at RYMagnuson.
I can be reached at SA Zorak.
And our special guest...
I think I'm at Tyrs HTML. I've forgotten what my Twitter is.
you are in fact at Tyrs HTML. That's TYRS HTML.
Professional guest.
Yes. So I have actually gotten some good suggestions from people. I'm trying to compile a list of those that I've gotten that I can have access to materials for. So definitely send those in. it really helps a lot. Feedback has been really useful as well. So, signing off.
Bye.
Bye.
WHIPCRAck.
Just not. Episode 10. That very bad thing. Who's it on? Tested frozen. On to the end. The cat had us. A more to his back. So Johnny, is it not very?